In 1933, a failing steam wagon company in Preston made one last desperate bet on the future of British haulage. That bet produced the circled A badge, a logo that would spend the next 4 decades becoming one of the most recognised symbols of heavy transport across Britain's industrial heartland. By 1970, Atkinson employed 800 workers and was building over 1,100 chassis every single year. 3 years later, the company was gone. They survived the Great Depression. They survived 2 world wars. They could not survive the corporate mergers and market shifts that swallowed British manufacturing whole during the early 70s. This is the story of how two brothers from Preston built a truck empire from nothing and watched someone else inherit their name. Atkinson and Company was founded in the Frenchwood district of Preston by two of five brothers, Edward Atkinson and Henry Birch Atkinson, with assistance from their brother-in-law, George Hunt. The real beginning of the company was in 1907, when the partners decided to capitalise on the need for local engineers to make repairs to the increasing number of motor vehicles on the road. Edward became an expert in the repair and servicing of steam vehicles, and was an agent for Alley and McClellan, the forerunner of Sentinel. The industrial north of England was transforming rapidly. Steam wagons were replacing horse-drawn carts for heavy lifting, hauling textiles, coal, and heavy machinery. But these early steam vehicles were brutal on their components, and every breakdown meant lost money for haulage operators. By 1912, the organisation had moved to larger premises in Kendall Street, and the number of employees had grown to 20. In the same year, a second repair centre was opened in Freemasons Row, Liverpool. This strategic move allowed them to cater directly to the enormous volume of steam traffic moving heavy freight in and out of the bustling Liverpool docks. The Atkinson brothers were smart businessmen. They realised that fixing other people's wagons was good money, but designing and building your own purpose-built machinery could be even better. With the outbreak of war in 1914, the demand for internal road transport grew considerably as the railways were overwhelmed with military logistics. The brothers decided to experiment by making a wagon of their own design, and in 1916, the first Atkinson 6-ton 4-wheel steam wagon was produced in Kendall Street, built with an undertype engine design that kept the mechanics low and improved driver visibility. It became an instant success. The timing was perfect. Most of the existing steam wagon manufacturers had turned their resources over to munitions production for the war effort, creating a massive gap in the civilian market. The Atkinsons had spotted an opportunity and seized it with both hands. The heavy transport market enjoyed a short boom period following the armistice, and the company purchased a 5-acre site of land near their homes in Frenchwood. On this site, they erected a new factory solely designed for the production of steam wagons. Together with the field, they bought the 17th-century Frenchwood house, utilising it partly as their corporate offices and partly as their personal quarters. By 1918, they had built up a highly competent team of engineers and salesmen, as well as an enthusiastic and loyal labour force. They were producing wagons that were highly competitive in both price and performance. Production rose to a peak of some 3 wagons per week, and the total labour force rose to well over 150 employees. Everything was going perfectly, but then tragedy struck the family business. In 1921, Henry Atkinson died suddenly, and the entire weight of the company fell onto the shoulders of his brother. Edward was deeply passionate about steam power, perhaps too passionate. He held a glorified view of steam engineering and largely ignored the harsh commercial warnings when sales began to slow down dramatically in the mid-1920s. The world was changing around the Preston factory, but the company leadership couldn't see it. Internal combustion diesel engines were rapidly becoming more reliable, lighter, and vastly more cost-effective. Operating a steam wagon required waking up hours before a shift to light the boiler, managing a 2-man crew of a driver and a fireman, and stopping for water every 20 miles. Road transport was evolving, and steam wagons were starting to look like heavy, expensive relics from a bygone era. In an attempt to consolidate the shrinking steam market, Atkinson bought the steam remnants of Leyland Motors in 1926, followed by the tooling and spares of MAN in 1929. These acquisitions should have been glaring red warning signs. When massive, established manufacturers are actively abandoning steam technology and selling off their leftovers, that is not a good time to double down on the exact same technology. There were various family rivalries at the time, and the firm was undoubtedly in severe financial difficulties when Edward decided to seek help from mine engineers and Pagefield lorry makers, Walker Brothers of Wigan. Under a new arrangement, Walkers manufactured advanced Uniflow engines for Atkinsons. Uniflow technology was more efficient, but by this time, very few orders were forthcoming. The market had moved on. The partnership with Walker Brothers was a desperate final move to save steam technology that hauliers had already firmly rejected. Battling cancer and unable to pay any dividends on the preference shares, Edward finally abandoned wagon production in 1929. A grand total of about 545 Atkinson steam wagons had been built. The final years of operation were only made possible by a cancellation fee from the Manchester Co-op Society, which had previously ordered 100 wagons. Even that financial lifeline couldn't save the original company. Edward died in 1932, and a year later, the firm he co-founded was acquired by London garage owner William Gilbert Allen, whose father had started the famous Nightingale Garage. For most companies, this would have been the end of the story. The factory doors would have closed, and the name would be forgotten. But William Gilbert Allen saw something in the Atkinson legacy that was worth saving. Allen travelled up to Preston and bought the business lock, stock and barrel for the princely sum of £6,500. The company was officially reborn and given a new name, Atkinson Lorries, 1933 Limited. Allen wasn't interested in romanticising steam power. He was a pragmatist, and he wanted to build heavy-duty diesel trucks. All of the old stock was aggressively sold off, with a massive lot of steamer parts going to Bibbies of Liverpool. Ancient, outdated machinery on the shop floor was scrapped or sold, and new, modern manufacturing equipment was installed. Third axle conversion work boomed, as did the highly profitable business of converting old petrol and steam lorries to diesel power. The company was completely reformed for the production of diesel-powered vehicles using the famous Gardner engine. This was the single key decision that saved Atkinson from the scrap heap. Gardner engines had a sterling reputation for bulletproof reliability, immense low-end torque, and incredible fuel efficiency that steam could never match. Allen recognized that Atkinson's heavy-duty chassis frames, originally engineered to carry the immense, crushing weight of steam boilers and water tanks, were practically indestructible. By pairing that bomb-proof chassis with a modern, lightweight diesel engine, the new Atkinson lorry was born. The production philosophy was similar to that of Seddon, ERF, and other competitors aiming for value-for-money lorry sales. The assembly of tried and tested proprietary components. A bought-in chassis frame, built strictly to Atkinson design, was generally powered by a Gardner engine driving through a rugged David Brown gearbox, sending power to heavy-duty Kirkstall Forge engineering rear axles. This was a brilliant business strategy. Instead of trying to reinvent and manufacture every single component in-house at massive cost, Atkinson focused on carefully selecting and assembling the very best available parts into a reliable, cost-effective premium truck. During World War II, the company stepped up to support the nation, building 166-wheelers and 108-wheelers for wartime contracts. Because Gardner engines were strictly reserved for vital military applications like submarines and tanks, Atkinson lorries intended for civilian hauliers keeping the home front moving were temporarily fitted with the AEC 7.7-litre unit. The grueling war years proved that the new Atkinson could deliver unparalleled durability when it mattered most. When peace finally came, William Allen reckoned about 6 chassis a week should be built to keep the operation viable and profitable. In December 1946, the company acquired a large, new site at Walton le Dale, and a modern factory was built, officially opening its doors during 1948. Atkinson ended the 1940s by reintroducing the beloved Gardner engines to its chassis lineup, marked by the launch in 1947 of the 6-ton payload model 644, powered by the efficient 4LK Gardner. The company was well and truly back in business, stronger and more adaptable than ever. Without having made a single export truck before 1948, Atkinson's reputation spread so rapidly that they ended 1949 with vehicles operating in punishing environments across South Africa, Rhodesia, Australia, Portugal, and Holland. In 1952, almost 50% of Atkinson's total production, roughly 300 vehicles a year, was exported globally. The 1950s were Atkinson's undisputed golden age. During this decade, hauliers began to demand heavier payloads and much more powerful engines to traverse the growing road networks faster. In response, Atkinson trial-fitted a massive Daimler 650 cubic inch engine rated at 150 horsepower in a rigid 8 chassis. But the biggest news in 1957 was undoubtedly the birth of the mighty Atkinson Omega. This was a 90-ton gross-weight 6x6 tractor unit, specially engineered for desert oilfield exploration and powered by a supercharged 6-cylinder Rolls-Royce engine. From 1958, the Atkinson 4-, 6-, and 8-wheeled general haulage range were offered with a revolutionary new fiberglass cab. Fiberglass wouldn't rust, reduced overall cab weight, and featured wraparound screens that vastly improved driver visibility, although the traditional bow-front cab continued to be produced for purist operators. Engine choices expanded massively. AEC, Cummins, Gardner, and Rolls-Royce diesel engines were available, alongside Perkins units for the lighter models. The company had completely learned from the mistakes of its steam-era founders. Instead of sticking rigidly to one engine manufacturer or one technology, Atkinson offered customers ultimate flexibility and choice. Different heavy haulage jobs needed entirely different power plants, and Atkinson could engineer and supply exactly whatever the customer needed. The famous logo was becoming a highly familiar sight on Britain's newly built motorways. The circular Atkinson logo dated back to 1937, having largely replaced the ornate Knight of the Road badge of earlier models. During the 1960s, these robust trucks were marketed under the Knight name, usually with a colour as a prefix, such as the Black Knight or Silver Knight. However, working operators vastly preferred the exposed radiators with the bold, unmistakable Big A inside a circle centered directly on the grille. The last true independent Atkinson, a Defender 8-wheel truck, was built in 1975. After that, the fiercely independent company that had survived wars and family tragedies was finished. The very last trucks to wear the Seddon Atkinson name were built in 2004, before the historic brand was phased out. Yet, the two brothers who started a small repair shop in 1907 could never have imagined their name would still be on heavyweight trucks almost a century later. Even after decades of mergers, loyal customers still asked for the famous ringed A badge. For drivers across Britain, that circled A was a promise of reliability and honest, tough British engineering. From steam wagons in Preston to diesel giants worldwide, Atkinson proved that a dying company could be reborn stronger. The name lived on, but the independent spirit that built those first steam wagons finally laid its tools to rest in 2004.